Every year, the Ag Hall of Fame committee nominates and chooses an individual for the special Visionary Award. This award is conferred on a person who has had an extraordinary impact on agriculture in our region. It's a highly competitive category, and every year there are many, many well-deserving nominees. The Visionary Award is sponsored by RDO Equipment. Would you please help me welcome to the stage Pete Taggares III to induct our 2019 Ag Hall of Fame Visionary recipient, Pete Taggares Jr.
Hello, okay. Hey, thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm Pete III. My grandfather left Greece in 1920 at the age of 18 for America. During his travels, he passed through the small town of Prosser, and the land around the town reminded him of his homeland of Greece. In 1931, my father, Pete Taggares II, was born. Pete grew up on a farm north of Prosser. He knew at an early age, farming is what he wanted to do. He graduated from Prosser High School in 1949, married my mother in 1950. In 51, he and my mother had their first child, that's me, when they were both 20. During the next several years, he leveled land on a dozer from sagebrush around Othello and other communities. When Grand Coulee Dam was built and water was available for irrigated farming, he realized this was a great opportunity for him. All the ground was spoken for around the Tri-Cities, so he set his sights on the small town of Othello, where dryland farming and cattle ranching were the main economy. He moved his family from Prosser to Othello in 1957. In 1959, he purchased his first farm. In the late 50s, he built a fresh packed potato shed, selling potatoes packed in boxes and burlap sacks throughout the United States. In 1962, in Othello, he built Chef Ready Foods. At that time, it was the largest French fry plant in Washington. He later purchased a plant in South Dakota and Minnesota. In the late 60s, he converted his potato shed into a fresh pack onion operation, which was one of the largest in the state at that time. In '66, he built Taggares fertilizer plant, selling Chevron and Ortho brands. In 1968, he developed a Concord grape vineyard, an orchard outside of Burbank. This farm was known as Snake River Vineyards, and for many years known as the largest Concord vineyard in the world. In 1974, he teamed with Jack Simplot to develop Simtag Farms, a 30,000-acre irrigated farm outside of Boardman, Oregon. There he later built a plant selling hay products sold throughout the world and a mint plant producing mint oil. In 1975, he was believed to be one of the largest irrigated farmers in the state, farming over 45,000 irrigated acres. He was always one to help out someone in need. I remember potato growers coming to him after having their potatoes rejected by another processor for various reasons. My father, knowing this could put the farmer in extreme financial hardship or out of business, would take their potatoes at a reasonable price and run them through the plant. As the plant manager, I remember thinking, oh no, not again. We don't need these potatoes. Knowing it's hard to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but that was the way he was. He was a quiet, behind-the-scenes type of donor, not wanting to be recognized for his good deeds. As Roger Teamy of Othello once said, Pete will only help out if you're in one of three groups: someone he likes, someone he doesn't like, and someone he doesn't know or doesn't know well enough to have an opinion of. After his stroke in 2003, during rehabilitation at St. Luke's in Spokane, he wondered why they had no site pool for the patient's rehabilitation, so he had one built for them. He was a major contributor to many foundations and charities, as well as universities and high schools. A visionary in agriculture for over 40 years. He was a perfectionist, obsessed with white paint. All his equipment and buildings were painted white, including the first 5 feet of the telephone poles lining his farmland. My father always had a cigar in his mouth, chewing them but never smoking. He was always in charge, a no-nonsense type of guy. When he made his point, it was always, here's the deal. He often made and signed binding contracts on restaurant napkins or a blank piece of paper. Danny Miller, a DC lobbyist, said Taggares would forget environmental impact statements before going about doing a project. Pete's idea of an environmental statement was to send a picture to the EPA of some land that he had already rearranged. You don't do that today. On Sunday, February 21st, 1999, a few days after a week-long vacation to Cabo San Lucas, he woke up that morning and proceeded to drive his road grader and level some dirt roads on his farm. But upon returning to his house, he sat down in a chair and said to his wife, Janet, "I really like Cabo." He then had a massive heart attack and passed away at the young age of 67. At the hospital later that day, I remember thinking as I looked at him, I have never seen a more contented look on a face, one of total satisfaction and contentment, like, I did it all and I did it my way. I would like to thank my daughter Jessica Loera for putting all this together, and I'd like to thank everyone involved in nominating my father. Thank you.
My father was a very strict, no-nonsense individual that just get her done. He was very fortunate back then that he was able to hire employees that understood what he wanted, and I've never seen anybody that managed people as well as he did with not putting as much time in, and they did what he wanted them to do.
My grandfather, as we called him Papa T, I had a great experience growing up with him. I was out there 5, 6 years old every morning in the summer working, really trying to instill that work ethic, hard work, determination, stuff at the time that I was more annoyed about having to not be able to go play with my friends, but now realize that that work ethic transpires to what I'm doing day to day. I think that definitely the millennial generation would have been hard for him to work with. But I think technology, all those things, he was innovative, had one of the first French fry plants in the Northwest. I think he would have definitely probably adapted and done that.
He was a very good leader and picked a lot of good individuals to help him in his businesses. He painted everything white, all his tractors and all his equipment was lined up in a row. And I can remember growing up in Othello, he was a stickler. He'd see one weed, he would send me out to get the weed in a pickup, or he'd send a sprayer out to get weeds. He was a perfectionist as far as how he did things, and he got it done.
So I really think, his accomplishments, span generationally. I mean, we're talking 18 years since he's passed away now, and, I'm still getting it from people all over the world asking me, tell them a story or something.
He took a lot of pride in what he did, and that's, I think, the legacy that he left to me and my son and others that have known him, prided themselves on trying to do the best job possible, and they understood what he wanted. That's how it all came down.
All right, we're here to present the Visionary Award is Jared Bailey with RDO Equipment, and to receive the award, as you saw in the video, is Pete's grandson, Pete IV.
All right, so I'm here on behalf of my family to accept this award for my late grandfather. I wanted to first thank the Pasco Chamber of Commerce for honoring my grandfather with this award. It's pretty cool to think about. I got my math wrong. It's almost been 20 years, so sorry about that. Anyway, a long time that he'd still thought of for an award like this really shows the impact, the legacy, really what he accomplished in the Mid-Columbian and the farming community. I wanted to thank a few people here, family and friends that came to support my grandfather. You already heard from my dad, my mom Sandy, my sister Jessica, and my aunt Johnny Poole. I wanted to also thank Ellie Charvet, who's here. He spent 30 years working for my grandfather and my family. Michael Sorensen, whose dad worked 40 plus years with my grandfather, and I think Michael grew up around him and will probably be able to relate to a few stories I'm about to tell. And then AJ Ochoa, who purchased the Othello farm, which was the original farm that my grandfather developed. And so, we got a lot of Pete Taggareses, just to make it more confusing. There's a 5-year-old My son's at home, 5 years old. His name's Pete Taggares V. So you guys aren't getting rid of this name anytime soon. So he's already, been told, and will continue to remind him of the namesake he has to live up to. So one of, my last memories of my grandfather was when I was in 8th grade. As my dad mentioned, he passed away, when I was pretty young a while ago. And so, some people also know my dad was, the high school football American, and I think at the time there was a thought that I might be able to follow in his footsteps. But, I wasn't really big on hitting anyone or getting hit, and so that obviously didn't work. So my grandfather decided he was going to take matters in his own hands and fix that. So the last game of our 8th grade season, I'm sitting there warming up, and I see his white Mercedes show up, and since someone already said, I said, oh shit. So I was going to keep it PC, but I guess it's okay. So I knew I was in for it that day. So he probably didn't have to say a thing. My dad alluded in the video how good he was at motivating people. I truly think that was just out of fear. People were afraid of ever letting him down and failing. That's what happened that day. He stood on the sidelines because, he did whatever he wanted right next to the team, starts yelling at me with his loud voice, come on, don't be afraid, make all the tackles. And for that time, it was the only time in my football career, unfortunately, I kind of went to a different zone. And I was all over the field tackling people. My coaches were pulling me aside, saying, what's gotten into you? Really just shows how much, I wanted to, and I think a lot of people never wanted to let him down. One of the other cool things with my grandma and grandpa I got to do was go on some fun vacations. Well, they always told it's vacations, but they ended up being really 12 hours of manual labor in a cool area. So, one time I was about 12 years old and went to the San Juan Islands. We were going to go boating, fishing, go around to the other islands. So the first morning I'm there, I get a knock on the door at 6 a.m. And it's my grandfather saying, come on, get up, let's go, put your clothes on. Well, we went out that day. It was the beginning of a 12 hours of working. He had a loader. He was driving around the small community, having me throw shrubs if he didn't like the way they looked in someone's yard, if I could pull them out, rocks. Once he got sick of me not being able to probably do as much work, he moved on to, as he would say, probably the heavy-duty work, which really actually entailed him taking a chain, tying it around people's trees and pulling them out of their yard because he didn't like the way they looked or they. This was something he always did wherever he lived, redid people's landscape. Now the nice thing is he always redid it for them, paid for it. In his mind, made it look nicer. That was, so we spend 12 hours working. I go home, have dinner, go to sleep. Next morning, 6 a.m., knock on the door, let's go to work. I look back, and that was supposed to be a vacation for him, but now I look back and realize how much of a workaholic he truly was, and that was, I think, relaxing for him. Being on a tractor, going around, helping people, that was just how he enjoyed his time. So in closing, I think one of the most important legacies a person can leave is how they impact future generations of their family. I know for myself, my sister, my cousins, Armin and Madison, we're still impacted today by the life lessons that my grandfather taught us. About 4.5 years ago, I purchased what was kind of the last family farm we had, Snake River Vineyards, and for the first time in my life became a farmer. So I grew up in a farming family, but I never really realized how hard farming is, how frustrating it can be, how you're constantly problem solving. And, when I'm faced with challenges, which, as we know in the farming business is all the time, I always step back and think, how would my grandfather handle the situation? It really comes down to 5 key traits that he lived his life by that I try to live my life by now. The first being hard work. Second is be a man of your word. Third is discipline. Strive for perfection. I think last and most importantly is never give up, as hard as something can be. So I'll call these kind of old school traits that I really think are missing from a lot of society today, and specifically my generation, but I think are vital to being successful in both in life and business. So my grandfather always said there was no shortcut for success other than hard work. So I hope he's looking down on me now and proud of the way I've lived my life, and I continue to live my life based on the impact he had. So in closing, wanted to thank the Pasco Chamber again, and thanks everyone.